Hi, everybody, and welcome to Adulting 101. Today's workshop is the connection between mental and physical health. So we're going to talk a lot about Mental Awareness Month, which comes to a close tonight. We've got some great presentations on what mental health is and how it really affects our bodies. It's not just our minds. Our hormones and all of our chemicals really affect us both mentally and physically. And so drawing those two together and really how we can help within our community and help our friends too. We've got some great people in the back of the room that are here for resources. And we're all here afterwards. We're going to do a question and answer with all of the speakers. So our first speaker today is a member of our board of directors. He's here really to talk about physical fitness and the mental connection. Dr. Tom Fernandez.
Well, thank you. Am I on? I'm good to go. Well, welcome. I'm Tom Fernandez. I'm a dentist here in town. Honored to speak to you all today, and I'm here to talk about the connection between physical fitness and mental health. I do live here, live and work and play, as I like to say, in South Tahoe. So 15 seconds of background on me. My wife, Tamara, and I live, work, and play here. We do have two kids. They're tiny, tiny kids. And we love to do Tahoe stuff. We ski and hike and bike and go outside and just kind of sit around in the backyard. And to draw that into the talk, this is maybe a bigger deal than we all realize because this is such an amazing place to get your head right. We're blessed to be able to walk out of our back door and breathe fresh air and exercise in the out of doors. That's a really big deal that's supported by some good science. I read an article as I was preparing for this, the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health drew a connection between if you live close to a green space, and I forget how they defined that, but there were a couple different, it was like within half a mile, and then there was a larger group that was in a larger cohort within 2 miles of a green space. You have significantly lower rates of depression in these groups of people. So we have green space everywhere, which I think is great. So I'm going to come right out and tell you the whole point of this talk, which is that fitness is the one thing you can improve in your life, and it will automatically improve every other area of your life. I'm going to argue that physical fitness is an essential part of your life, and you should be trying to improve it. You shouldn't be happy with where you're at. You should be trying to get better at it because it will make you a better person. It will make you happier. It will make you more fit to be in the world, which is a weird thing to say. This talk really isn't to give you the how, but more the why and the motivation, and just kind of give you some basic tools. I'm also going to argue that physical fitness is in fact the basis for mental health, i.e. you can't be mentally healthy if you aren't physically healthy, if you aren't physically fit. Why am I qualified to speak on fitness? So to back up a little background, fitness is basically a lifelong pursuit and a passion of mine. I was a decently high-level swimmer in high school. I majored in physiology at the University of Arizona. That was my undergrad physiology. And my undergrad capstone class was on exercise physiology. I stayed very fit in college, but fell out of the habit during grad school, like we probably all did, and then got back into it. Now I exercise 5 days a week. That's just kind of my routine. But I'm also not a perfect example. I'm just kind of on this journey too, and really fascinated by it. So this slide that you can't see says every day is a good day to work out, and it says why should you work out? And so I'm going to risk alienating my audience here, but I'm going to suggest that if you are not working on physical fitness, if you're not increasing this area of your life, you are not reaching your full potential. And I don't mean that to be insulting. I mean it to be motivating and to get the gears going. What else could you be doing? if you were working on this area of your life, if you were improving in this area of your life. And to also say, if you are struggling in an area of your life, like in mental health, if you're struggling emotionally, find a way to start working on fitness. We'll talk about the whole time aspect later, but you need to be incorporating that into your life. There's a book I want everyone to read, and I have, I can give you the name later, I can write it down for you or something, but it's called The Power of Full Engagement. It's by Jim Lair and Tony Schwartz. They're performance psychologists. It's a really cool book, and the audio presentation is actually great. You can get it on, what's that, Audible, if you're into that sort of thing. They actually read it. It's very good, very accessible. The Power of Full Engagement. It's great. And one of the things they talk about in the book, it's a tiny little group, but raise your hand if you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with this. Okay, good, sweet. So you're familiar with this. It starts, Maslow has at the bottom physiological, meaning can you eat and breathe and stuff like that. Safety, love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization. They invented some weird level above that. But the point of it is you can't move up his ladder until you've satisfied whatever your bottom level is. So you can't actually start making yourself, if you were a caveman, you couldn't start making yourself a little cave house until you had something to eat in your cave house. So this is the key point in this ladder, is that you can't move up if you haven't taken care of the level, of one level. So the full engagement, the power of full engagement, this book, the authors suggest a similar pyramid, but they say that physically full engagement requires you to be physically energized, emotionally connected, mentally focused, and spiritually aligned. And they arrange it in a pyramid with physical at the bottom, so in order I just said it, physical, emotional, mental, and finally spiritual. And their argument is that the physical is fundamental and essential. So what this really means for us in our discussion today is that fitness is not just about getting six-pack abs or a nice butt or Python arms. It's actually about being in better balance. It's about having a pancreas that functions better, a brain that functions better, and having less of those stress hormones like cortisol flying around in your bloodstream. If these things are true for you, you'll be better equipped to handle the stress of day-to-day life, because day-to-day life is stressful. And you'll also be able to move up the pyramid. If you're trying to work on your emotional state, if you're trying to be emotionally connected or mentally focused, and you haven't built the bottom of that pyramid by being physically energized, you're going to have a really hard time. So I have a slide full of great quotes about physical fitness, and it's a whole slide, and it's like in 14 print. But suffice it to say that a lot of really smart people think fitness is important. So we should too. A feeble body weakens the mind. There's a good one. I like that one. So I also have this thing that I made up, but I called it the ladder of fitness. I totally fabricated this. It's not really supported by any good research, but I think it's good. I hope you'll agree, and I think it's a useful way to think about physical fitness and a way to incorporate it into your life. So I have 6 kind of rungs on my ladder of fitness. Excuse me. And at the very bottom, we have an area I just call sedentary, and this is where you're not working out. And there are legitimate reasons to end up here, which I'll talk about. But that's the bottom rung, sedentary, not working out. One up from that is what I'm calling out of shape. And this means you're occasionally working out. You're working out once or twice a week, and you're kind of randomly, you might hike or something. To me, this is the most dangerous level to end up at, because you're doing something, and you can fool yourself into thinking you're doing more than you actually are, or that you're higher on the ladder than you actually are. I know this is what happens to me. That's what happened to me in grad school. You get out of shape, and you're like, well, I'm not that out of shape. I'm doing something. Yes, but you should be trying to move up to the ladder to what the next category, which I call active. And I'm calling active, you're working out. You're doing something maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and occasionally you're doing an active hobby like hiking or biking. Again, it's easy to do this in Tahoe, and we should take advantage of it. I would suggest not going below this active rung unless you have a really specific reason to do so. So here's what I'll talk about. There are reasons to end up in that sedentary category, or even out of shape, one of which is like injury. You got hurt, you need to take it easy. And another one, which I have, my family has a lot of recent experience with, which is pregnancy. Sometimes you just can't work out when you're pregnant, so those are reasons to drop below that active category, but unless those things are true for you, stay in this active category or higher. So active, and one up from that is what I'm calling fit. And fitness involves, the definition I made up, purposeful, frequent, focused working out. You're able to do most activities in life without undue struggle. I think this is the most kind of effective level to exist at, because you're getting the benefits of working out, of being fit, without having to bend your day-to-day life around fitness. And in this level, you may be making, consciously making better food choices. This is my favorite level. It's an easy place to be. You're working out 3 or 4 times a week. On the weekend, you do something fun and active outside. You're gonna feel better, you're gonna sleep better, you're gonna have more energy, but you don't, like I said, have to kind of bend your day-to-day life around whatever you're doing. One up from fit, I'm gonna call it elite. So you're doing everything in fit. You're doing purposeful, focused, frequent working out, but you're probably doing some higher level nutrition stuff. You may be like counting calories or grams, eating at specific times. And the other thing I think in elite is that you're actively trying to expand your performance across domains, meaning you're consciously trying to lift more, move faster, be more flexible, be more coordinated. This requires a lot of effort. And if our focus is just kind of increasing your physical health so that you can move up to that next level and be mentally more healthy, this is being in this elite category may actually decrease your mental health depending on your personality, right? And the last rung on the ladder I'm calling competition and freaks. If this is something that's meaningful to you in your life, you can end up here. But I would suggest staying in the center of my ladder, active, fit, possibly elite. If you're really into this, sure, go for competition, but not really something that's that fascinating to me. You can move up and down the ladder too. This is another point. It's not like you get to one place and you're like, oh, I'm done. I reached here and I can kind of, stop for now. The ladder is like a ladder. You can go up and down it, right? But this ladder is also to tell you that you don't have to look like a cover model. You don't have to be in that competition category to enjoy the benefits of working out, to enjoy feeling better, sleeping better, having less stress hormones in your life. In fact, I would suggest that competition level is not an appropriate goal for most of the people in this room. Some people, it's great for them. But the amount of sacrifice involved in reaching that very top level would probably throw your life balance out of whack. That being said, you should be trying to move up the ladder. A quick word on nutrition, since I touched on it. Make sure you're eating well. This isn't a presentation about nutrition, because we could spend hours on that and it turns into this like almost a religious thing, but for people. But eat real food. An easy observation is keep your grocery cart to the outside aisles of the grocery store. If you find yourself in that middle aisle with 1,700 bags of chips, you just leave that area. Be outside. There's meat and veggies and good stuff around there that are going to fuel your brain and make you feel better and be more mentally healthy. You can look at food labels. You don't have to read them word for word. The thing I would suggest with food labels is look at it. If it's got 1 million ingredients, it's probably not good for you. Put it back. Just, fish has 1 ingredient. It's fish. Stuff with stuff that has a long shelf life should be treated with suspicion. Again, chicken goes bad in your fridge very quickly unless you eat it, and chicken is chicken. It's very easy to figure out what it is. So I know what probably everyone's thinking at this point, which is, this all sounds great, but I don't have time. Phooey. I'm going to suggest that everyone here has the time to work out. In fact, I'm going to also suggest that you need to find the time. You have to make this a part of your day. It's literally the most important thing you could find time to do because it builds the base for everything else you're trying to do. And you don't have to work out for hours and hours and hours on end to enjoy the benefits here. That's what the whole middle of that ladder is about. But also that steady state cardio is not ideal or even really very effective for increasing your overall level of fitness. You don't need to run for like an hour and a half or 2 hours every day. It's boring. It's terrible. I hate running. That is to say, unless your training needs are highly specific. I mean, if, competition or sports of some kind. But there's this thing, I'm sure everyone's heard of this, called high intensity interval training. And by employing this to your advantage, you can get a really effective workout in, say, 30 minutes. And this method of training is actually better for you than steady state cardio. And I've got some studies that are kind of fun. The American College of Sports Medicine, their health and fitness journal, these high intensity workouts actually increase your VO2 max and decrease your insulin resistance, which is a factor in type 2 diabetes, right? Better than steady state cardio does. For those of you who care about this kind of thing, there's a great study out of the University of New Mexico that high intensity training actually increases what's called your excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC. And what that means is you actually burn more calories after you stop working out if you're doing it at high intensity. So that's kind of cool if you care about like, oh, I can work out shorter, burn more calories while I'm working out, and then that burn kind of goes on throughout the day. That's pretty sweet, right? Laval University, again, if you care about this sort of thing, high intensity training actually makes you better at burning fat and then less likely to store it. Which is, again, I think that's pretty cool. And you should be incorporating resistance training anyway. Cardio alone is not enough. I think you need to be building muscle tone. It's more fun, it's more enjoyable, it keeps your training kind of fresh. Here are some suggestions for working out. I'm not endorsing any of these things. I don't get money if in any way if you choose these things. But this is kind of silly, but those Beachbody programs, you've seen the infomercials, have actually been really effective for our family. They're really cost effective. You can do them almost anywhere. They're really fun, and they can be done at home. I CrossFit. I love it. It's not for everyone, I know, but it's a great way to meet people. It's really fun. In fact, working out in a class is great. So let's kind of pause here for a second, since we are talking about mental health. If you're trying to, get out and just kind of free your mind a little bit, going to a class is better anyway. I prefer kind of a, hey, how are you doing today, sir, Jim, rather than just going into your basement or your garage and you turn on a video. Doesn't kind of give you the same effect mentally. Classes are great for this, for the camaraderie, but also just being at a gym where there are some other humans like in your general vicinity can really be helpful. I know it's true for me. You find yourself in kind of a dark place mentally, just get out, be around other humans, and better yet, be around other humans who are also working out. It's great for you. It can really help. My last little point to be made here is, so if you want to be better at your job, work out. If you want to feel better about yourself, you should work out. If you want to react better when a family member or a coworker gets crossways of you, you should work out. If you want to live longer, you should work out. You're noticing a pattern. It's a choice you can make every day. If you want to have more energy for your kids or your hobbies, whatever they may be, work out. I can't remember where I heard this, but I've heard that fitness or working out, kind of the whole process is like slamming yourself into a wall over and over, hoping that it will move back. And every time you do work out, though, it does move back a tiny bit. And then the next time you move that wall back a tiny bit more. So my promise, my vow to you is that I'm going to keep slamming myself into that wall day after day, I will do it, and I hope you will join me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Tom. Some great information there. I know we have a personal trainer in the room. We have a Beachbody coach in the room. I've done a little PIO and T25. Thank you, Sean T, for kicking my butt here and there. So there's definitely resources to network with within the room if you're interested in starting a program or learning a little bit more about that physical fitness mental connection. Within the young professionals and within our community, there are definitely a lot of different resources. Our next speaker is a wonderful woman here, here from Barton Health. She is here very generously with her time, and we have next Dr. Sonia Rupp.
Well, thanks for having me. I was asked to come talk to you about, can everybody hear me? I know my voice is kind of low. So I was asked to talk to you about the connection between physical and mental health. I'm a psychiatrist at Barton. And originally I was going to talk about stress and mental wellness, but then I thought with it being Mental Awareness Month, I wanted to talk a little more about what it is I do, mental illness in general, and try to decrease the stigma. So, so I hope you don't mind I get off topic a little bit, but first of all, what is a psychiatrist? Well, we're not mind readers, we're not psychics, we're not hypnotists that are going to make you lose control and flap around like a chicken. We are a branch of medicine, and so I did 4 years of medical school, and then all adult psychiatrists do a 3-year residency program. And then many of us subspecialize. I subspecialized in child and adolescent psychiatry, and so that's a 2-year fellowship. So it is a branch of medicine, and we try to look at the whole person. So not just medical problems, but treatment of mental, emotional, behavioral problems as well, from both endogenous factors, things that go on in the inside of the body, but also external factors too. Sometimes external factors can certainly affect mental health. I wanted to give you a little history because I think this explains why there is a stigma. If you think about it, back in the old days, people didn't know what mental illness was. Perhaps you had a family member that all of a sudden changed personality. You didn't know what to do with that. There weren't really resources, and nobody knew what to do to treat that. And imagine if you're starting to feel something emotionally different inside of you, the last thing you want to do is have someone identify you as mentally ill, because then you'd be locked away in an asylum somewhere. So back in the late 1700s, Philippe Pinel was a medical student who, one of his good friends committed suicide. And so he's one of our fathers of psychiatry, because he wanted to learn more about mental illness after his friend committed suicide, and took a job as medical director in a French asylum. And this was back in the late 1700s. So typical treatment back then was to lock people up in chains in an asylum in solitary confinement, or bloodletting was a common treatment. Insulin shock was a common treatment, just because we didn't know what else to do. So he was trying to study this, and he observed that even just by going to see his patients every day, some people actually got better. So he's known for the humane treatment of the mentally ill, because he actually took people out of chains and had time to talk to them and see them every day. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, Emil Kraepelin was a German psychiatrist, and he started to look at that people that were in an asylum, they weren't all just one type of mental illness. They had different characteristics. He started to look at classification of disease, and he coined the term dementia praecox, which is what we call schizophrenia today, and manic depression, which we call bipolar disorder today. So many of his classifications we still use today And then, of course, Sigmund Freud is also a father of psychiatry. Where Kraepelin was looking at the biologic components for classification, Freud was looking at more the nurture part of it, the environmental factors that can affect our psyche. And he had theories about the mind being the id, ego, and superego. And if there were problems in your environment and with your upbringing and nurturing, that could create an imbalance, and then that would create either a psychosis or neurosis. He kind of classified mental illness into two broad categories. He's also well known for developing psychoanalysis, because he also found that by talking to his patients that a lot of them could get better. The psychoanalysis is the basis for all of our talk therapies today. He also did a lot of studies on human sexual development and also interpretation of dreams. I wish I had my slides to show you too. The Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is the handbook that everybody in my field uses. And the original copy first came out in 1952. It had about 128 diagnoses. And the first two editions basically took Freud's ideas of neurosis and psychosis and tried to classify those disorders with the idea that we were trying to find treatments now. And in the 1970s, the National Institute for Mental Health started doing a lot of research on mental illness. And they found that a lot of mental illness and mental disorders had a biochemical component. So DSM-3, which came out in 1980, now doubled the amount of diagnoses, had more ideas on treatment, and that's when the American Psychiatric Association also got involved. The most recent edition came out in 2013. We're now on DSM-5. And now DSM-5 is the number 5 instead of a Roman numeral because it's trying to be more technologically advanced. So revisions are going to be 5.1, 5.2. We're up to 1,000 pages now and over 541 diagnoses. And they all correlate with the International Classification of Disease. The World Health Organization has the ICD system, which classifies every disease. So if you go to your primary care doctor for an infected toenail on your right big toe, there is a code for that, and it's that specific that it would be your right big toe. So now our mental health diagnoses correlate with that as well. And I know you can't see this, but now we look at it as a spectrum, that mental health is not just like in the old days, you were either ill or not ill. Now we know it is a spectrum, and that spectrum can run where any one of us could fall anywhere on that spectrum depending on what we're going through, what kind of stressors, our environment. And then, of course, genetics, too, play a role. I like the American Psychiatric Association definition best. And they called a mental disorder is a health condition involving changes in thinking, emotion, or behavior that are associated with distress and or problems with functioning in social, work, or family activities. So you see that it's more encompassing now. And so I hope that that can help decrease some of the stigma. Well, I'm going to show you this because I wanted to talk about the brain. You can't really talk about psychiatry without talking about neurology. And so I know this is hard to see, but basically the brain is 4 main lobes. And this affects movement, sensory input, and speech. The cerebellum here helps us have smooth movements so that we're not all spastic. And the midbrain here regulates all our bodily functions, heart rate, respiration, temperature, sleep, hunger, consciousness. Sorry, I can't get this to move. So inside the brain, and if my slides would work, I can show you. There's also the limbic system. So this is inside the middle of the brain. It's the limbic system. This is the area of the brain that pertains most to me. Because that's what manages our motivation, our concentration, our focus, our memory, our emotions. and behaviors. It's also the primitive part of the brain, like Tom was saying, that we have that fight or flight response. That's where that happens. So that primitive part of the brain is really important for survival. So it manages fear, it manages pleasure, and you can see how when there's imbalance in any part of the limbic system, that it could cause a lot of the symptoms that you see with depression and anxiety. For example, with depression, you have sleep changes, appetite changes, concentration problems, lack of interest in your usual activities, lack of pleasure in your usual activities, and of course suicidal thinking. With anxiety or PTSD, it's that fight or flight response firing off all the time, and that creates that feeling of anxiety, agitation. With PTSD, part of the limbic system is involved in memory. The amygdala receives sensory input from your lobes of your brain, and it sends that information to the thalamus, which will process that memory for long-term memory storage. So in something like PTSD, when you've had some kind of trauma, then you're reliving those negative thoughts and negative memories over and over again. Again, that limbic system is firing off when you don't want it to. The brain is also, we have gray and white matter, and the ventricles in there. And what I wanted to show you here was the corpus callosum. It's that thin part in between that helps the brain communicate right and left brain. I know this is hard to see too, but this is a slide of a schizophrenic patient. There's two things I wanted to show you on this slide. First of all, some of the anatomical changes that happen with schizophrenia. The ventricles enlarge, the gray and white matter gets smaller, the cingulate gyrus, or the part that communicates between right and left brain, gets thinner, and so there's less communication between right and left brain. The other interesting thing about this slide is this is monozygotic twins, in other words, identical twins. They have exact same genetic makeup, yet one twin is not affected and the other is. So the important thing about that is that even though a lot of mental disorders are genetic, they're not 100% inheritable. That there's a lot of other factors that go into play when an illness develops, kind of like cancer. What we're learning about cancer is that you might have that genetic predisposition, and that certain factors in your environment, maybe exposure to a toxin, can set off that gene so that one family member might develop cancer and another might not. So that's the key thing I wanted you to get out of today's talk, is that there's a lot of factors that go into developing mental illness. And upbringing, your temperament, environmental factors, traumatic incidents, genetics, they all play a role, but you can do things to decrease that severity or decrease onset if you do have that tendency. I was going to share a few statistics from the American Psychiatric Association. About 1 in 5 adults will experience some form of mental illness within 1 year's span. The most prevalent are anxiety disorders, depression, and substance use disorders. 1 in 5 people will develop depression, some type of depression in their lifetime, but only half will probably seek treatment. About 12% of people misuse alcohol and drugs, and that's grossly underestimated, because I think that statistic is talking about people who meet the criteria for substance abuse. A lot of people have binge use disorders, and actually substance use is a big part of workplace absenteeism and loss of productivity. More than 50% of the doctor's primary care visits are going to be mental health related, usually depression, a lot of times anxiety. Another key point that I wanted to get across, and again this is trying to decrease the stigma, that with treatment, a lot of people live with a mental illness, and that with proper treatment, a majority of individuals with a mental health diagnosis can continue to live their daily lives. So I think that's important to know, and I had a slide here showing some examples. Demi Lovato, Kerry Washington, Carrie Fisher, Stephen Fry. The National Alliance of Mentally Ill is an advocacy group that developed in 1977. Jeannie Nelson was going to be here today, but she was sick. And they do a great job. The NAMI groups, we're very fortunate to have such a strong NAMI group in South Lake Tahoe. They developed to support families because probably about 1 in every 5 families is going to be directly affected by a loved one with mental illness. And so NAMI is a support group, and they provide a lot of education and community connection with resources. So again, I wanted to talk about prevention and decreasing the stigma. A lot of things are out of our control, like our genetics and our upbringing, but there are things that we can do to improve or decrease the risk of getting those illnesses. Nutrition, physical activity, that's very important. But also, by taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally, you can lead by example. You can show others good things to do to take care of yourself, both your physical health and your mental health. But being proactive about taking care of yourself can help you be proactive about reaching out to others. You're more likely to listen to somebody or ask them how they're doing if you're taking care of yourself. And know the resources in our community so that if you do reach out to help someone out, you can help direct them wherever they need to go to get some help. So the majority of my talk was supposed to be about stress and how it affects you. Like Tom mentioned, you have cortisol that is a stress hormone. So what happens is your brain picks up this perception that you're in danger. You know, some kind of sensory input that there's a danger. The amygdala that processes memory also connects to the pituitary gland, which secretes a hormone that tells your adrenal glands to secrete cortisol and adrenaline. And what that does, and this all happens in a matter of milliseconds, is that the cortisol and adrenaline cause your pupils to dilate so you can see further. It causes your blood pressure to increase and your heart rate to increase so that your blood is circulating faster. It causes blood to be shunted away from organs that you don't need in that moment to go to your skeletal muscles for strength or for flight, to be able to run away. And blood sugar increases too. So your fat stores release blood sugar into your bloodstream so that you can have energy for your skeletal muscles. Clotting factors increase too, because if you were to get cut, you don't want to bleed out while you're running away. So you can see how with chronic stress, all of those organs would be effective. So if you don't have a way to reset those hormone levels, those are the organs that are going to be affected. You're going to be at risk of headaches, blurred vision, GI problems, heart disease, diabetes, clotting problems, and the immune system can be affected as well. So I have an acronym that I use with a lot of my patients, BREATHE, and this is what I use to talk about good mental health. So the B in BREATHE is for breathing, relaxation exercises, and that can be yoga, meditation, or just breathing to center yourself. And there's been a lot of evidence, especially in the East Coast. There's several mindfulness institutes in the East Coast that have studied this, and they have even done MRI scans and have shown that with meditation, even if it's 2 to 3 times a week, that it can change the gray and white matter, especially in that amygdala part of the limbic system, which means your baseline resting level is more calm. It doesn't mean that you can't have a fight or flight response if you need it, so your body would still respond, but that baseline level is calmer. And that's a really good way to kind of reset those stress hormones. The R in BREATHE is for routine. Try to keep yourself regular hours, sleeping at the same time, eating at the same time, and prioritizing your time. Like Tom said, you want to have that time to exercise, both physical exercise and mental exercises to reset. So the E in BREATHE is for exercise. And again, it's not just physical, you need to do those mental exercises too. I have a lot of people that tell me, well, I relax by watching my favorite TV show or looking on YouTube. Well, that's really just a distraction because you're not thinking about it while you're watching it. And so if you can do a mental exercise where you're actually thinking, that's going to reset your push away worries as opposed to just watching something that's a distraction. Once you turn off the TV or the laptop, those worries are going to come back again. So mental exercises would be things like puzzles, reading, could be art, making music. So there are a lot of different options. And the A in breathe is for acts of kindness. And what I mean by that, acts of kindness for yourself and others. And that is things like guilt and resentment are really negative emotions that just pull you down. So if you can push away those thoughts, forgive yourself, recognize you're human, you make mistakes, let things go when you make a mistake, but also learning to forgive others, that has been shown to be helpful in calming negativity and risk of depression and anxiety. The T in breathe is for talk. Again, socialization, just like going to a class for exercise. Socialization has been shown to be helpful. Humans are a social species. And so even if you're feeling down or you are shy or anxious, you don't have to put yourself in a situation that's uncomfortable. It could be as simple as going to coffee with a friend. H in breathe is for hobby or interests. Hopefully we all get a sense of purpose from our jobs, but it's nice to have that balance of having something outside of work that gives you pleasure too, or that gives you a feeling of self-confidence or self-worth. So a craft or a sport that you're involved in, any kind of interest. It could be something that you do with your kids or volunteer work. That's also been shown to be very helpful. And the E in breathe is for ending the day on the positive note. When you're depressed and anxious, it is hard to change your thinking and try to think on the positive side. Your brain tends to want to stay in that negative thought, especially if you're dealing with something like post-traumatic stress, where that memory loop is firing off. So at the end of the day, just try to end on a positive note, and eventually, when you're feeling better, it will feel real, and you can force yourself to start thinking more positive with practice. So finally, I'll just say that a lot of great masterpieces, Beethoven, Van Gogh, O'Keeffe, Michelangelo, Francisco Goya, they're all known to have had some type of mental illness, and yet they've developed great masterpieces that we appreciate today. So my goal with talking to all of you is to hopefully decrease stigma and help with prevention and remind all of you that taking care of yourself physically and mentally, not only are you proactive about taking care of yourself, but you can reach out to others, and that way we can prevent serious mental illness, hopefully, and have everybody reach their potential. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Rupp, for your time and all of that wonderful information. Maybe we can get that PowerPoint presentation from you and put it up on our website so that people can receive that information and take a look at those slides. Now I'm going to bring up a great community member, Sabrina. She's here from El Dorado County Mental Health. She has a great program going that she's really been pushing since last year. If you see anybody with a fluorescent green bracelet on, you will now know why. She is here to give us a little bit of information about them and distribute some bracelets and share a little knowledge with us.
Thanks. You want to hold them? All right. So first of all, you can't have a bracelet without a commitment. So box says commitment required. So we started these bracelets as a campaign really for you to take care of the people in your circle. All good health starts with connection to other people. We are social beings, and it's important for us to maintain a connection with people in order to maintain our health. And one of the things that happens is when people start to get stressed or depressed is they tend to isolate. And they withdraw and they start talking to people, and then they can get worse. And so we started this campaign twofold. So there's the mental health movement for California is called Each Mind Matters. So we stole a little piece from that. And on the bracelets, on one side, they say, "You matter." The other side just says, "I will listen." And what these bracelets do is they let people know that you are available. And the people that I'm talking about are the people that you run into regularly, like your coworkers or your peers or people at the gym, family, friends. They are an indicator to those people that if they need someone to talk to, that you would be that person to listen. And it sounds simple enough. So we wear them. You'll see them around town. They're at the library. They're at Alpina Coffee. They're at Keys Cafe, a couple of different places in the community. So you can pick them up there. The only commitment is that if you're wearing one, that you're willing to do that listening. Sometimes, though, it gets a little bit beyond listening. You might have a conversation with someone and go, uh-oh, I'm in over my head. They need to go talk to Dr. Rupp. Or they need to come see me. Or they just need more than what I can provide. So the commitment also includes a willingness to walk them through finding resources, if that's what they need, or actually helping to get to those resources. It might be taking them to their first appointment, accompanying them to their first recovery meeting. So it's really a commitment to take care of our own little circle of people that we run into every day. So, like I said, you can't have a bracelet unless you're willing to make the commitment. And so if you see this bracelet, it means that on that day, this person is willing to make that commitment. You can wear them all the time. Mine goes through the shower and the hot tub and all that stuff. Really doesn't come off. But there are people that have these bracelets that are having a real hard time that day, and they're like, I can't. So they don't wear it that day, and that's fine. So it's really an obligation, a commitment on your part. If you're willing to do that for your little group, then you wear the bracelet. And the idea behind this is my circle's a little bit different than your circle, although we have some people that overlap, and my circle's a little different than yours. But if there's enough people in the community that are wearing these little green bracelets, then our community starts to get covered as we overlap. And pretty soon, we are available for all our community in Tahoe, as well as, unfortunately, the West Slope has caught on to my idea. And so I went to a meeting there a couple of weeks ago. We had 500 bracelets. And after a 20-minute talk, the 500 bracelets were gone. So this month alone, we have gone through almost 2,000 in South Lake Tahoe. So if you'd like to be a part of this movement, and this isn't specific to Mental Health Awareness Month, because mental health doesn't just last for a month or a week or an awareness day. This is a commitment. So if you're willing to, we actually created this year as well. We have West Slope and South Tahoe specific. A little flyer that explains the commitment, as well as how to be supportive. The first step is to listen. It means putting down your cell phone and turning off the TV and paying attention and just being there for that person. It could be as simple as going for a walk together, going and having a cup of tea, or it could be more intensive, as we talked about. It also has resources, the crisis text line, because if you're working with teens, they don't want to talk on the phone, they want to text. So we have the crisis text line on here. We have El Dorado County's mental health crisis line, veterans crisis line, friendship line, suicide prevention, NAMI, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and the Trevor Project, which is for LGBTQ. I get all those acronyms all mixed up all the time. Anyway, so if you're willing to take part in this, then I invite you to come up and get a bracelet. Don't be shy. We've got some out in the audience already. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. She's going to have them at the back table afterwards. Thank you very much for filling us in on why we're seeing all of these green bracelets. And the fact that they've given 2,000 out this month just shows what a loving, supporting community we live in. I'm really proud to be a part of this community and to see the leaps that they are making in the mental health world and in the support for each other in the last few years. So our final speaker is Melinda Choi. She is here today as a local business owner, and she is here to talk about the connection between our gut and our brain, and how what we eat and how we process things is going to affect how we think and mental illness.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? Good. My name is Melinda. She said, and I own Elevate Wellness Center, and I'm a licensed acupuncturist, and I also practice functional medicine. So how many people have heard the term the gut-brain connection? Right? So it's really getting more and more popular these days, where people are looking at how to be able to treat both the gut and the brain, because they're commonly seen as these associative disorders. So this is kind of the new wave of research of how things are going. I'm here to tell you a little bit more detail about it, and so that way you can look at common practices and things that you can do to either prevent mental illness, or even just to help to provide better mood and comfort to your well-being. So I want to start off by saying one of the originators of the term of where the gut-brain connection comes from is a woman named Natasha Campbell McBride. Is anyone familiar with her work? So she wrote a book, and it's called Gut and Psychology Syndrome. It's a really interesting book. And she has an MS in neurology and then also in nutrition. And she has a son who is autistic. And she refused to believe that what he ate had nothing to do with what was going on with his brain. So the science is still out. We don't really know what's happening when people have autism, and especially autism in children. But there is some sort of component where they're now looking at possible for genetics, but they're also looking at neurotoxicity. So when people are saying, well, vaccines cause autism, it's not necessarily that. I mean, they've already disproven that. But one of the things that I always look for is what are our exposures that's putting pressure on the brain. So she talks about it in her book. She talks a lot about and explains the gut-brain connection, the gut-immune connection, and the gut-skin connection. So how many people have heard of that? So Hippocrates has said thousands of years ago that all diseases arise from the gut. And what we're finding is that a lot of that is true. So if we go back and looking at the gut, well, we're going to say, well, that is then they call it the second brain, right? We've all heard the second brain in the gut. That what you commonly see is people who have things like irritable bowel syndrome also tend to have more issues with depression. So what they want to look at is, well, initially it's like, well, why don't we start looking at using antidepressants to treat IBS as well? Since we say that it's the second brain, there's often a connection where people will get nervous or anxiety and then also have some irritation within their digestive system. So we know that those two things are connected. So how much detail should I go into about this? How much do you guys really want to know? I want feedback and participation. Give it to us. Okay. So basically what we're going to look at is that, I think Sonia touched on the central autonomic nervous system. So you're looking at your nervous system, and your nervous system is so important for how you are digesting and just dealing through life, right? So with your autonomic nervous system, you have two sides of it. So you have sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic is fight or flight, parasympathetic is rest and relax. The other side of what they also talk about in parasympathetic is also rest and digest. How many people eat on the go? So eating on the go, you're still remaining in your sympathetic nervous system when you're in rest, where you're in fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, you're getting all sorts of hormonal signals going to your body where you're ready to either fight a tiger or run away from it. When you're going to fight the tiger and run away from it, are you going to eat a sandwich? You're not, right? Because there's no way that blood flow needs to move to your organs, and you have to release certain hormones like cortisol and adrenaline to be able to get you to fight or run away. These are not the hormones that you need in order to digest appropriately. So if you continue to eat on the go, or go in fight or flight, and then you're trying to eat a meal, or you don't rest and relax and get into that proper place of your digestive system, you're not also getting good blood flow to your digestive system. So when you're not getting blood flow to that digestive system, what's happening is that you're not signaling for a healthy production of enzymes, nor are you signaling to your liver and gallbladder to release bile, and you're not preparing your body to take food on. So you're gonna have issues with how well are you digesting those foods. When you have a harder time digesting that food, it goes down, and it's gonna leave a lot more work for your lower gut to have to deal with that food. Most of us culturally already, in just the way that we're born and the overuse of pesticides, we're in just living in cities and antibacterial soaps, we're not getting that good, healthy microbiome anymore. So how many people have heard of the term microbiome? Right, so these are all new things that are in the latest of science of what they're looking at in order to really help to manage our health. So we're getting lower and lower exposure of bacteria into our gut, and bacteria is also what helps us break down our food. So it's helping us digest appropriately, it's helping us break down fiber and carbohydrates and sugars. And when you have that nice, healthy balance within your gut, you're able to really digest appropriately. Appropriate bowel movements, and it helps to also regulate and seal up your lower GI. So another big term that people talk about these days are what they call leaky gut. So leaky gut basically means that the lower GI has lost its integrity within the gut lining and the wall. So you should have tight junctions in between so that you can release, so that your toxins are going to flow out through your bowels. But through inflammation, chronic inflammation, microbiome, or what they call dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of healthy bacteria and unhealthy bacteria, you're not digesting your food well, it's going to lead to inflammation. When you get inflammation in your gut, you're no longer going to have that integrity within that cell wall, and you're going to have toxins that are going to start to flow out of your system. So we're supposed to be a closed system. So we have a blood-brain barrier, and those things are not supposed to be going to our brain. But very much like the tight junctions that you have within your lower GI, you're also having that for your blood-brain barrier. When you have chronic inflammation and you have more and more toxins leaking out, that can also put disruption to the brain. Does that make sense? Okay, so now you're no longer digesting well because you don't have the enzymes releasing. You're putting a lot more pressure in your lower GI, and then you also have an issue with your microbiome, not digesting food. Well, that just sets you up for a pretty potentially poor situation. Most people that I see I see a strong connection between people who suffer from anxiety or depression and also having gut issues. So I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and so the way that I work with it is by working through their gut. Let's get them to relax, calm their nervous system down, retrain the nervous system so that way you can actually digest your foods appropriately. And then we start introducing healthy bacteria. And then you really want to heal and seal that gut lining to keep those toxins from continuing to exacerbate the condition. So there's ways that you can do that through eating appropriately and also adjusting your diet and also just changing how you eat. So rather than the concentration of what you should be eating or shouldn't be eating. I mean, number one, we already know we shouldn't be eating sugar, right? Like, you're going to eat some sugar, but sugar definitely can lead to dysbiosis and just continue to feed that imbalance within the microbiome. So you want to limit your carbohydrates, limit sugar. You want to introduce good, healthy bacteria through a form either of a probiotic. I always have people do at least a high dosage, high complexity probiotic. Or you can also add in fermented foods, and I actually have people do both. So I'll usually do at least a probiotic with 10 or more different strains of bacteria in it, and you want at least 50 plus billion. If you're having real digestive issues and 100 plus billion, you want to work your way up towards that. And then you can also add in fermented or cultured foods. And that's all the rage right now, right? Someone tell me what a fermented or cultured food is. Kimchi, sauerkraut, right? What's that? Kombucha is, yep. You don't tend to use kombucha therapeutically just because it does have a lot of caffeine. The base for that is always a caffeinated tea, and then it also has sugar in it. And so what they say is that the sugar does get eaten up by the mother culture, but there's still a certain component of sugar, and then that caffeine just stimulates the nervous system, so then you're right back into your fight or flight or adrenal state, right? Anything else? What else is cultured? Kefir, yep. And yogurt. But commercial strains are always a little bit lower in variety because you're not letting it culture as long as you could if you're making it at home. It's a really simple thing to do. So there's a lot of different resources online, but the cultured vegetables that you can get in the store tend to have good variety. So you want just higher amounts of complexity. Out of your probiotic, you're going to get about, like a max 29 strains is one that we carry. And then beyond that, there's about between, they say, 500 and 1,000 different strains of bacteria that reside in our system. So that's a lot. So they're still trying to identify. There have been some studies that have been shown that when patients are given probiotics who suffer from depression, that they were using a really specific strain of probiotic given to these patients who were suffering from depression. And what they found is that it actually improves. It was 65% of the patients improved and had longer lasting results from people who did not get probiotics. So they just used that for one particular study, and they chose that particular strain. But ultimately, we don't really know exactly what all of them are doing. So I think the greater complexity that you can get, the better. So clearly, reducing sugar can be really beneficial, and reducing your simple carbohydrates can also be beneficial. This is all things that Natasha had said, and you'll see this more and more in these new diet fads that are out there with the Whole30 and there's Mark Hyman, there's a lot of different people in the paleo camps, right? But ultimately, foundationally, you can just look at, okay, Natasha Kimmel McBride had said this way back when, and a lot of these diets are changing from there. So this is kind of a part of her protocol and just a protocol that we work on commonly with our patients. So we've kind of we've established that you're reducing the sugar, balancing the microbiome, adding in probiotics. What else? The way that you eat. So sitting down, calming your nervous system down, even just taking 2 to 3 belly breaths is a great way of just signaling the body to go into parasympathetic. So breathing is actually what stimulates your vagus nerve, and your vagus nerve is what is connecting with the enteric nervous system. And the enteric nervous system is where you feel that nervous stomach. It's your enteric nervous system that's firing up. So ultimately, if you take deep breaths, so take a few deep breaths right now with me. So that should be one, the second one. Anyone feel a little hungrier? So when you're preparing to eat, I always, I have people, even say a blessing before their food. You can rub your ears, rub your belly, trying not to work and eat at the same time also. Reading a magazine will still kind of do that to you. I mean, if you must, then you can read a magazine. But eat socially, take breaks from work, sit down together and have that time together so you can really enjoy your meals, because the more relaxed that you are, the better your digestion will be. So I think that's pretty much covers it. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So yogurt is overwhelming to shop for, so since you brought it up.
Sure.
If I'm at Safeway,
Uh-huh.
I look for low sugar. That's sort of my go-to is the higher protein, the lower sugar. But is there a brand or a specific yogurt that is the best sort of mass-produced one, the better bad choice per se, that you would say to grab off the shelf that you're going to get more benefit from?
Sure. I mean, I come from a totally different school of thought with food. I think that the more natural that it is, the better it is for you.
Yeah.
And so I always say go for organic, of course, and then whole fat.
Yeah.
When you reduce fat, what you're getting is faster amount of sugar that's moving into your system. And then you don't want any flavorings to it unless it's a natural flavoring. But I don't even trust when it says natural flavors, because what is that, right? You could just flavor it on your own. So ultimately, the difference between Greek yogurt and just standard yogurt is usually just the type of cultures that they use and for how long you make it. But it's really simple to home make yogurt. So what I always look for is I look for organic whole fat milk, and then I look at how many different strains of bacteria are in there. So I like Strauss, I think is a good one. I think one of my new favorites, I'm trying to remember the name of it. They're actually finally doing a Greek yogurt that's whole fat. I had a really hard time finding that for a while. And then I just start hating the plastics that they come in. So it's like you come back down to just making your own yogurt. It's really simple. There's a really great website that's called Cultures for Health, and they have a lot of instructions and videos, and you can also buy the different cultures from them. I think Grassroots also carries it. For people who have sensitivity with lactose, you can actually make a lactose-free yogurt at home. And the way that you do that is not from lactate milk. You do it from basically the way you make yogurt is that you heat up milk. So you just heat up regular organic whole fat milk, and you get it to just under the point of boiling. And then you can always get a starter culture, and you just take it off the heat. You stir in the starter culture, and then you just want to put it into a container. You could put it in mason jars, and you want it to be at a stable temperature. And I cannot remember exactly the temperature, but you can look online. But they say if you just put it into your oven with the oven light on, that's enough. So 5 hours of that, and you have yogurt. And then what you do is just put it back in your fridge, and that keeps things from continuing to ferment and culture. If you want a lactose-free one, if you let it cook for over 24 hours, the bacteria eats up all the sugar. So it eats up all that lactose, and so you're gonna have lactose-free yogurt. And then you have a lot more cultures out of that too. Pretty cool, right? Yeah, so kefir is the same thing, super easy. You just do, we're gonna eventually do a class on fermenting and culturing foods. So you guys could look at our website, or if you just sign in for newsletters, that we'll be doing a class on, I think Janine is gonna make sourdough, and then I'm gonna make different ferments. But kefir is super easy too. I mean, you literally can buy kefir starter and put it into either a goat milk or a whole fat milk, and then you just leave it on your countertop and just let it sit there. And then when you're done culturing it, you just can strain out the kefir and reuse that, and then just put it in your fridge. So super easy. So I'd say like at least one serving of fermented food a day, and then one dose of your probiotic. And just one last thing about the microbiome is really fascinating, so I love this topic. But when you look at your microbiome too, there's a lot more. What they're looking at these days is how well is that biome established, and when does that really get established. So what the research that I'm looking at and what I'm finding is that the microbiome can be established by the time you're between age 5 and 7. So if you're a child who was, born C-section and then fed formula and not getting that good initial introduction of good healthy bacteria, that you're also looking at that as your foundation of health. So hopefully your parents had then given you a lot of dirt to play with and not overly wash your hands and get you outside and keep you away from antibiotics. But by the time, if you're on the other side of that you had a kind of, you had chronic infections, chronic ear infections, had a lot of antibiotic use early in that time, your biome and what is actually continuing to produce in your system is established by the time you're between age 5 and 7. So anything else that you do right now is transient, which means that it's no longer being produced and housed in your system, that if you stop taking that probiotic, it's out within 60 days. So there's different research studies on that too, and they'll be able to test your biome. We're doing free microbiome tests at our office as long as you have health insurance. It's kind of an interesting thing, or part of a pilot program. So you can actually look and see what type of bacteria is in your system and how you can support different types of bacteria based on what you're eating. It's kind of a fascinating thing. So just another little thing on that. Anyone else have any other questions? I think we're good.
Thank you, Melinda.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
So we are going to wrap up our live stream here, turn off the cameras, and let our audience that's here in the room have a little more intimate discussion with our presenters and ask a few more questions. I want to thank Tahoe Production House and Leica Stream for getting this out to the entire world for us. Little Old Lake Tahoe gets to broadcast to the World Wide Web thanks to our amazing sponsors. They really take care of the Tahoe Regional Young Professionals anytime we need them to give us a little support. So thank you. Thank you to El Dorado County Mental Health, the Suicide Prevention Network, Elevate Wellness, our presenters here today. Thank you for everybody for showing up on the live stream and here live. Enjoy the rest of your evening and have a wonderful week.